Hey night travelers, tonight we're trading candlelit courtesan fantasies for the scratchy, disease-riddled truth of sex work in the dirtiest centuries of human history. Forget lace, perfume, and polite conversation. Welcome to a life of lice, public shame, and trying not to die of syphilis before payday. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 1623. The good news: you've got a profession that guarantees a roof over your head, at least for now. The bad news: that roof leaks, smells like mildew, and your upstairs neighbor boils animal hides for a living. The first thing you notice this morning isn't the light. It's the smell of stale ale, damp straw, and a lingering, metallic tang that makes you worry about what happened in this room last night. Your bed is a sagging sack of straw that doubles as a flea colony. You've been scratching all night, but the bites just keep coming. Clean sheets, a fantasy. You own one blanket, which has been washed exactly never, because washing it means hauling it to the river and scrubbing it in water that's more sewage than stream. The good news: you've figured out a few tricks to stay presentable: lemon water for breath, herbs stuffed under your armpits, maybe a dab of vinegar behind the ears. The bad news: half your clientele smells like rotting teeth and will happily share whatever skin disease they've been cultivating. Bathhouses exist, sure, but they're also prime disease-sharing hubs, where clean is relative and privacy is non-existent. Outside, the street is a carnival of smells and sounds. Piss pots emptied out of windows, hawkers shouting about pies you're sure have pigeon meat, and drunken sailors swaying toward your door before the sun's even up. And that's before you remember that today's cleaning ritual means a splash of cold water to the face, wiping down with a rag, and hoping the rouge covers the rash. By the time you're powdered, patched, and pretending your stomach isn't twisting from last night's questionable stew, you're ready to face the day, which, in your line of work, is less romance and more survival with extra steps. You wake because the cold pinches every bone it can find. Your breath fogs in the thin light that leaks through a cracked shutter. It smells like soot and old beer, and something sweeter you don't want to name. The pallet you've been calling a bed is a lumpy bundle of straw and torn cloth that slides when you move, as if it can't be bothered to hold you upright. One corner of the blanket has a patch darker than the rest, blood or treacle, you can't tell, which is exactly the sort of mystery you learn to accept without asking questions. Your toes meet a floor that's been sticky since before you were here. Last night's piss, spilled ale, someone's buttered bread mashed into the boards, time has made them into a single, tacky scar. When you edge out of bed, you hear the hollow creak of a loose plank, the kind that always betrays you when you try to tiptoe. Your stocking catches on a nail and snags. You curse under your breath and peel it free, fingers numb and clumsy from the cold. The single candle on the sill gutters when you lean toward it. Its flame is small and sighs like a tired man. Candle tallow curls black along the rim of the pewter cup you use for washing. A splash of that water down your face gives you the sensation of being slapped awake. It doesn't warm you. It just shows you the map of the night across your skin. A ring of grime around your throat, a smear of red on your cheek you'll pretend is makeup. The mirror, a shard of glass tacked into a wooden frame by the landlord's apprentice, shows you someone who has been worked over and still smiled for coin. There's a new bruise forming where a client thought your ribcage could be used as a drum. Sound travels in these rooms like gossip. From downstairs, the tavern is already waking, the low thrum of a barrel being rolled, a chair scraping, a voice booming a tune in a key that wants to be merry. Men clamber onto the stairs with boots that have never seen soap. A sailor laughs too loud, and a woman behind the bar tells him to keep his hands to himself. You listen and learn whether the morning is worth opening your door. The louder the laughter, the more likely there'll be coins in a fist later. The quieter the house, the better odds of a morning without more trouble. A rat scuttles along the joists. The sound of its tiny claws a reminder that you share a roof with creatures braver than most customers. It slips by a patch of the floor where someone has left last night's pie to harden, blue-black fruit of an earlier appetite. The rodent pauses, nose twitching, then dives. You watch and think about how easy it would be to let it fetch you food. Instead of buying bread you're only half sure hasn't been pocketed from the stall across the lane. Outside, the street is already a theater of small disasters. Through the cracked shutter you see a cart jolting by, its driver shouting for room as a mule stumbles on the cobbles. Two women are fighting in the gutter over a piece of cloth. One of them wails so loud she makes the watchman look up from his patrol. Side incident: the watchman barks a warning and then slips on a puddle full of offal. He recovers his dignity better than his trousers, and the crowd laughs, which in this city is as close to a blessing as you're likely to get. A boy darts past, cradling a loaf he clearly cannot afford to buy. He glances up at your window and grins with that half-starved, full-hearted mischief that makes your chest ache. You want to offer him a crust. You do not. The landlord's cough is the next thing to announce itself. He has one of those hackings that sounds like a bell tolling for a man who refuses to leave his debts. He clears his throat and stomps about with the keys to every lock in the house as if they were the only things keeping the world together. You can hear him downstairs counting napkins, counting coin, counting sins, everything but mercy. He'll knock on your door in 3 minutes to ask for your room rent, because he always knocks when you have the least, as if timing were a craft. There is the smell of boiling tannin from someone's workshop 2 doors down. Leather smoke enters your room like an unwelcome guest. The tannery's owners work through the night, their vats fuming, their men swearing as they bend hides into something a soldier can wear and call armor. The tannery is a lifeline to some and a curse to others. Its stench is a certainty, like taxes. Side incident: a man in a threadbare coat staggers past with a bundle of hides over his shoulder, trips on a loose cobble, and watches with hollow eyes as the hides fall, and a woman calmly proceeds to cut a strip for a child's shoe right there on the pavement. Survival does not wait for sympathy. You dress with the economy you've learned on purpose. Layers, because warmth is a ledger you must balance. One clean shift, clean enough. A woolen gown with a patch on the elbow where someone once tried to teach you how to sew. A muffler smelling faintly of lavender you keep for customers who appreciate finer things. You tuck a handful of herbs into your bodice, not for scent so much as for the bravado of smelling like it. Vinegar is your armor. A dab behind each ear is like a boast to yourself that disease will have to get in line. When you step to the door and open it, the hallway hits you with a smell that is all house. Boiled cabbage, coal smoke, a child's wet shawl, the sour tang of fermented things. A neighbor appears at the top of the stairs to spill gossip like coins. She's 2 months pregnant and proud, and tells you about a varlet who claims to be a poet. She's sure he'll marry her when his next poem sells. You say you hope for her sake that his verses are more marketable than his morals. She offers you a wink and a boiled egg she swears is edible. You take it because hunger is practical and hope is a luxury you can't afford. Before you leave the room, you pocket the small things that make life livable. A coin for ale in a pocket, a flint for the candle, a scrap of lint you have been nursing like a talisman. You close the door on your world of leaky beams and sticky boards, and the house sighs as if relieved to be left to its own vices. Downstairs the tavern swells toward noon. Laughter, a minor brawl breaking out near the hearth, the clink of pewter. You step into the noise and into the day, into the commerce that is your livelihood and your hazard, counting each breath you take as if it were payment. You shuffle to the corner where the basin sits, a dented pewter bowl nicked from some tavern's back shelf or hauled from the wash-house 2 doors down. The water inside is clouded with slewed skin and old soap, and when you lean over it, you see your own face reflected like a candle-flamed ghost. The surface trembles as you scoop with cupped hands and throw a sheet of cold over your cheeks. It hits like a slap, sharp, immediate, forcing awake the part of you that would otherwise sleep through hunger and worry. The cloth you reach for is a strip of linen, roughened from use, reeked with the faint sour of vinegar. Vinegar is a poor substitute for clean water, but it does something to human sense. It bites the oils away and pretends at purity. You wrap the rag around your knuckles and press it to the hollows of your throat. The smell makes your sinuses flare, and for a second the world is only acid and linen. It pulls at the grease at your temples, drags away the sleep at the corners of your eyes, and raises a cloud of dust that tastes like old straw between your teeth. You scrub where the roads have left grime, jawline, collarbone, the backs of both hands, the motions practiced, automatic. Your fingers know the map of every scar, callus, and old bite. You can feel the nubs of flea eggs under the skin of your forearm and you flex, trying to dislodge them. The linen rasps like a dry tongue. When you press too hard, a flake of skin comes off and you cough at the taste of it in your mouth. It's not bathing, but it's serviceable. The vinegar's a cheap disinfectant and the scent will keep the worst from pressing clothes. A rat skitters underfoot, bold as a servant, and pins your heel. Your foot jerks. The basin slaps the floor and sends a droplet that lands on the hem of a neighbor's skirt. She curses from the next bed and the shout ricochets through the rafters. There are reasons you keep your movements small, no flourishes here, only necessary gestures. You mop at your face again, and when you lift the cloth you see a smear of someone else's grease on the corner where your own hairline meets a smear of you can't tell. The knowledge sits like a coin on your tongue. Everything shared is contaminated. Outside, a boy's voice pipes up, announcing fresh herrings with extravagant promises of briny fertility. The sound makes your stomach twist with a want you will not indulge today. A constable lurches by, truncheon resting on his hip like a question mark. He pulls a drunken weaver from a doorway and their argument spills into the street. The weaver's breath is sour. The constable's rant is nasal. The slap of a palm on a palm follows. Hearts thump in time with the city's discontent. You listen to the cadence, timing your breaths to avoid drawing attention. There is always the risk of two kinds of stains, the ones on your skin and the ones people see. You run the cloth down your arms, under the wrists, trying to hide the faint tattoo of bruises that bloom where a hand was too rough last night. You press vinegar into a particularly angry welt. The sting is immediate and sharp enough to make you laugh at the absurdity. A laugh is cheap medicine. It keeps tears from rising and gives you a momentary distance from how that welt will fester. A rival passes beneath your window, a woman with a plume of hair and a laugh like coins. She pauses, glances up, and for a beat you measure her against yourself. Her dress might be fresher, a patch of blue, maybe a stolen ribbon, but you know her privations too. She lights a pipe and coughs at the smoke. The pipe glows like a dying ember, and you have sympathy and scorn in equal parts. Both of you are bargaining with whatever currency you have this morning. As you work the rag across the soles of your feet, you find a sliver of glass, a memory from the night, someone anonymous, a dance that was too rough. You press it out with a fingernail, tasting iron on the pad of your tongue and wondering which alley will host your afternoon. You wrap the cloth tighter and fold it into itself, the vinegar muffling the metallic tang. For a moment, you imagine a bathtub with steam and lavender and a servant to lift you out. Then the picture collapses under the weight of coins you don't have. A housewife on the floor below bangs a pan in the rhythm of prayer, sending a dull noise up through the boards. A child peeks its head in, nosy, a question on its lips. You swat it away gently. You cannot afford to be seen while you dress. The child lingers, eyes bright with the sort of curiosity that will ruin you someday if it grows. For now you offer a hasty smile and a coinless blessing, the soft lie of a woman who will pretend to be harmless. There are practicalities too. A comb pulled through hair, teeth scraped with a stick, a dab of diluted wine behind the ear to cover a smell you cannot wash away. You coil your hair because loose hair is trouble in more ways than one. It invites hands and lice. Both, you tuck the linen rag under your arm as if it were a talisman. Its sour odor promises that at least for the morning you will not be the foulest thing on your doorstep. You breathe it in and let the vinegar steady you. There is a kind of ritual power in that scent, a reminder that even the poorest measures have their rules. Another small incident rides in on the day. A chimney boy chases a chicken into the courtyard, scattering feathers and a shower of laughter that is almost cruel in its sudden cheer. The laughter lifts a weight from your shoulders for a second, the absurdity of life going on while you scrub the corners of your body clean enough to be traded. Then a voice calls the boy back, and the mood snaps, the city returning to its habitual noise. You tuck your face into the faded collar of your gown and inhale smoke and vinegar, mixing a scent that says you are awake, available, and still intact. You finish by rinsing the rag in the basin, wringing until your knuckles ache, and then tucking it under your bed, a small altar that will serve you until tonight. The pewter bowl is set aside, a smear of water left to darken the wood. You run your hand over your face one last time. The vinegar has not made you beautiful, of course. It has merely postponed the decay. But it has given you a map. Where to hide a mark, which smile will sell for a shilling, which cough to fake as a tickle. You stand, toes curling into the straw that smells faintly of last week's ale and mold, and pull on a skirt that is patched in 3 places. The world outside continues to roar and cough and bargain. The quick clean is done, a sacrament performed with vinegar and old linen, and you step toward your day, knowing every small ritual buys you a little more time. The basin cools behind you like a patient mouth, and the rag smells of sourness and survival. You peel back the blanket, and the air that rises is warm with human history, the sour of last night's sweat, the iron of old blood, the sharp tang of ale gone wrong. Your fingers find the little linen sachet you sewed months ago from a ragged scrap, the thread knotted with the same impatience you used to stitch a sleeve. Inside are the day's armor. Sprigs of rosemary, a fistful of dried thyme, some crushed lavender, and a strip of rue so bitter it makes your mouth pucker when you breathe it in. You do not wear lace to your work, but you do wear small defenses. You tuck rosemary straight into the hollow beneath your arm, pressing the woody stems against skin that has already begun to smell like the alley. The oils pop under your thumb, green and piney, and faintly medicinal, and they bloom into the hot skin with a flash of cool. It doesn't make you smell like a garden. It interrupts the smell you have, splits it, makes it less personal. People notice the rosemary first, not the sweat, or at least they notice enough to keep offering coin. You press paired sprigs between toes as you stand, wedging the herbs into damp creases where the smell nests. The rosemary needles scrape and sting. You laugh a sound that's more a cough. The herbs don't heal everything. They are a trick. Outside, the street yawns and thrums. You lean out to let in the air and the city reaches back. A cart squeaks past, wheels crooked, leaving a narrow river of filth in its wake. A boy with a face smudged in coal lurches by with a tray of sprigs, 5 for a penny, hawking his small harvest. He knows exactly where to find you. You barter a half-stale biscuit for a handful of thyme, because thyme messes with the taste of rot more than anything else you've found. The boy counts the biscuit with the solemnity of a taxman and presses thyme into your palm, then sprints off as if you had paid him in gold. He's a quick side incident. The world keeps moving while you prepare for your day. You rub the herbs hard into skin. The action is almost ritual now, a sequence you learned from older women in the house. Crush, bury, press. The crushed lavender releases a faint sweetness that fights the alley's sour notes. Thyme leaves a bitter, almost metallic aftertaste in the air, enough to confuse the nose, not to cure anything. Rue stings and makes you think of the last time you tried to be genteel, of a customer who sneered at your hands. You have not been gentle since then. A little thyme behind the knuckles, a sprig of lavender at the throat. You tuck rosemary into your hairline where sweat gathers like a curtain. In the corner of the room, a pot boils not for you. Someone upstairs renders fat, and the smoke curls down like a benediction you did not ask for. The scent of burned marrow is another layer to smother. You pinch your nose and keep going. Between toes, the herbs dry to a paste when they meet damp skin. The rosemary needles grind underfoot like tiny splinters. You walk across the floor and crumbs and dust rise in a cloud that lands back on everything. Foot care is mostly superstition and hacks. You powder, you rub, you set the herbs where they can rub against sweat instead of skin. It helps. It does not make you immune. A man bangs on the door. The knocks are impatient and wet with drink. He smells of brine and tobacco, and you know before you open that his hands will be rough, his purpose simple. You slide a sprig of lavender into your pocket as if for luck, and unfasten the latch. The man's breath wafts rosemary and something sour. He coughs. You offer him the choice of window or room, and he points, unsteady. The little sachet at your throat becomes a bargaining chip. He sniffs at it like a dog offered a bone, then snorts laughter and leaves a copper coin on the bench, which clinks like a promise and then a threat. You let the door close slowly on him, the herbal smell held between you until it's gone. Sometimes the herbs are also medicine. You dip rosemary into ale left from the night before and hold it under a boil on your ankle, because you learned by bitter experience that heat plus herb can pull out some pain. You smear crushed thyme into a rash and let it sit until the itching eases. These are makeshift surgeries performed with the tools at hand. There is a small, humiliating satisfaction when the swelling calms. It is not healing so much as postponement, like sweeping dust under a floorboard before a guest arrives. A rat slips through the crack, and the sight of its whiskers is a minor horror that makes your stomach drop. You shove the rat away with your foot, scattering rosemary needles. Rats like warmth and crumbs in human habitats. They are constant companions. You could, theoretically, do worse than have a rat. It will not ask for coin. It will not grope you for free. It will, at least, be honest in its theft. The rat becomes another incident. It scurries and is gone. You watch its tail disappear like a comma. You tie the empty sachet around your wrist and set out, the herbs rubbing against sweat and skin with every step. People pass you in the lane. A woman with a basket of fish who tosses you a sour look. A clergyman whose nose lifts as if he fears contamination. They read you in your posture before anything else, the anxious swing of arms, the way your hips keep time like clockwork. Your herbs make you smell less of you and more of the sea and the garden and pastures you have never seen. They are deception and comfort in one small, fragrant bundle. At the market, a cabbage seller sneezes and then apologizes as if illness were etiquette. Someone mutters of the pestilence that still lingers in stories and memory. You listen and you think of the times a neighbor's cough turned into more. You load your fingers into the sachet again, grinding leaves until they bruise, until oil and scent are all you can smell. You press the leaves to the soles of your feet and between toes, because that's where a lot of your life rubs, where leather meets damp, where the ground tries to take its toll. You are hardly naive. Herbs do not save you from fever or tarnished coin, or a magistrate's cruelty. They do not mend a cut deep enough to reach tendon. But they are a small rebellion, a private perfumery against a public stench. They let you walk out the door with something less like shame clinging to you and something more like intent. You wear them with your patched skirts and your brave face. You slip through the world with a little green in your pockets and a smell that confuses hunger for hope. You sit at the thin slant of light from the shutter and push the lid off a small, dented tin. The metal tastes like copper against your tongue when you test it with your finger. A quick, foolish second, where you remind yourself that the white inside is poison and prosperity all at once. It is called ceruse, white-laid Venetian ceruse in the gossip of the better rooms. To the world it bleaches you into acceptability. To your blood it is a slow, ticking misfortune. You have learned the shape of necessity. You have learned that pale is status, even if the pale is literally death. The pad you use is nothing fancy. A scrap of linen folded over and stitched, stuffed with wool pulled from the mattress, still smelling faintly of urine and hay. You dip it and a soft cloud rises, a little ghost of alum and lime and something that clings like static to the air. It rests on your palm, powder the color of old bone, weightless until it isn't. You hold your breath, because always you hold your breath at the crucial moments. You press the pad to your cheek. The dust blooms outward, settling into the creases of your face with the impatience of flour on a table. It fills the lines around your mouth and flattens the raw shimmer of last night's fever into something matte, neutral, polite. The pustules you have been hiding beneath loose kerchiefs sit quiet for a moment as the powder dulls their shine. The big, ugly marks near your jaw take on a porcelain calm, For a breath, you are not a body with sores, you are an acceptable face. Then you cough. It starts small, a dry tickle like something sanded at the back of your throat. You try to stop it, clamp the air down, but the powder has already arranged itself in a faint constellation along your palate. It grinds under your tongue with the grit of bricks. Your lungs reject it like a foreign sermon. Each cough throws more dust loose, a scatter of white like a sleet of tiny bones. You cough until your chest burns and your eyes water, and when you can breathe again, you taste iron and chalk and the distant memory of tangy vinegar. The morning is not empty. A scrape of boots on stair, a child's laugh outside the door. To your left, a woman from the other room, Matilda, practices her own routine. She has a booming confidence. She slaps the same white onto her forehead with a practiced hand, then blows the excess away as if it were dandruff. 2 weeks ago, she boasted that the Duke had taken her to dinner. Now she coughs more heavily than last month. You do not mention the cough. The room is full of small deaths in slow motion. A hawker slips past the door and calls, "Rosewater, rosewater for the skin." The call drops like a pebble in the pool of your morning. He is selling the myth that you can mask everything with a bottle. That scent will hide what is unseemly. You buy the smallest vial with a coin that smells faintly of iron. You dab it at the temples after the powder has been laid, and it makes your skin sing like a lute, but only for a minute. The powder insists on staying. You forgive it. You need customers who will not look too closely. You work methodically. You pat at the bridge of your nose because the pores there have been speckled by small pox and scabbed in the last biting winter. You press again at the hollow of your throat. They say a white throat suggests lineage. The powder travels down, a dusty tide that picks out the freckles you were born with and the new markings you acquired under a lover's fingernails. Your hands tremble on the last motions, and you are careful not to rub at a scab that would make the white crumble into flurries. Outside, a cart cracks a wheel on the cobbles, and a thin dog skitters through the spray of the rent boy's bucket. A child spits on the edge of the gutter and the spit arcs, glittering with some other man's tobacco. You flinch, and a flake of powder falls onto your lap and then onto the straw. You brush it away with the same hand that minutes before has been coaxing a notch of prosthetic civility onto your face. Matilda sneezes in a way that sends more dust airborne, and for a moment the room is full of tiny clouds catching the light like a strange, domestic aurora. A knock strains the thin door. It's a stern-faced constable making rounds. Matilda claps her hand over her mouth, which is powdered like a moth. She opens the door a sliver and the man barks for rent. He barely looks at faces, only papers and purse strings, but you still slap on one more generous sweep to your brow, because habit is religion here. The constable's shadow falls through the room and your profile, plastered in white, looks stately for a second. He does not see the rawness at your jaw. He does not see the flea behind your ear. He counts the coins, leaves the letters, and the life in the room drifts back to its small defeat. You pat your cheeks until the pad is chalked and slick. Somewhere between your jaw and the hollow of your neck, the powder cakes in a line where a rash has set in from a cheap-scented soap. You try to feather it out with the curl of a brush you stole from a market stall, a short item with bristles that have caught other women's secrets. The powder settles there like mortar. The mirror is a small circle scratched into a piece of tin. It does not lie. You tilt your head and the face that looks back is a mask made of commodity and necessity, an alabaster mask painted over ruin. Another cough comes, this time tighter, as if the wind itself has taken offense. It jerks from the bottom of your ribs and leaves a taste of coal in your mouth. Your chest feels like it has been rubbing against a rough cloth, and you wonder, not for the first time, whether this is the way most of you will go powder and cough and the slow dimming of spark. There is a sick humor in picturing your funeral, pale as a church altar, dust in the sure light, neighbors remarking how proper you look. Yet when the door opens later and a customer steps inside, reeking of tobacco and ambition, the face you have engineered does its work. He leans in, squints as if to read the fine print of your features, and then, satisfied with the translation, he pays without asking. You watch the hand with the coin, still clinging to a glint of silver, and your throat tightens for reasons that are not all grief. When the powder begins to flake at the edges by dusk, you will brush the residue off with a cloth, smear a little more on the big sores, dampen a rag with sour beer to set the rest. You will be careful not to eat with the same hand you used to tap the blackened tin. You will promise yourself, like every other woman in this street, that tomorrow you will try a different thing. A different vendor, a different potion, maybe an extra dab of rose water. You do not promise to stop. For now, you sit in the thinning afternoon and watch the dust settle. The house hums with low, ordinary noises. A kettle clanging, a ladle scraping, someone singing off-key down the lane. The powder is on your skin, in your hair, in the creases of your knuckles. You cough again, not loud, but enough that the sound gathers attention like a small, polite bell. Your lungs throw up another tiny constellation of dust, and you taste the future, bitter, white, and inexorable. You clean a smear from the corner of your mouth with the same pad, and for a moment you believe the mask will hold. Then you put the tin away under the straw, lock the tin's dented lid with a thumb, and step into the street with your face arranged to sell comfort where there is none. You lift the lid of the chest and the smell hits you, not just the sour, human heat of bodies, but a layering of other lives. Candle smoke that's been trapped since last feast day, the faintly sweet rot of spilled wine, and an animalic musk that tells you this dress has been worn for more than one kind of labor. The gown hangs limp in the gloom, its color attired something between brown and what used to be red. Where embroidery once lived, there are only shadows. Your fingers find the sleeve cuff and come away with a fine dust that flakes into your palm like the skin of old bread. It's stiff where it clings to your fingers. Sweat has salted the fabric into a crust. You can hear it whisper as you shake it free. You breathe in close. There is a tang of iron and something faintly floral, probably from a flower someone pinned on foolishly and then forgot. You imagine it pressed against strangers, layered through nights, absorbing breath and spit and the odd tear. You shrug it over your shoulders and the gown protests with a creak of seams that weren't meant for the strain. The neckline wants to gape. The hem is laughter, a ragged laugh where moths and street grime have taken bites. You lay the gown over your knees and spread out the damage. There is a long rip where a man caught a nail on a doorframe. You can see where his cuff tore and the thread hesitated. Near the left hip, someone stitched a heart-shaped scrap of fabric months ago with pink thread that has long since faded to shame. Around the underarm, there is a circular stain that still smells faintly of citrus and something medicinal, an old attempt at masking. A chunk is missing near the back, as if the gown had been used to staunch a wound one winter night. You hunt for tools. The needle is small and slight, borrowed last week from Mrs. Daveney up the landing, who keeps better things in loops of cotton tied to her belt. The thread you find is mismatched. A coarse hemp strand for the hard seams, and a silk filament you pinched from a ribbon that last night's drunken lord discarded in his haste. It is ridiculous and practical both. You thread the needle with one hand, where callus meets callus, and with the other you hold the gown taut. Your tongue presses against your teeth out of habit the way you do when you are concentrating. You patch using what reality provides. A strip cut from a shirt you wore the year before becomes a bandage for a larger tear. A scrap of false finery, silver-threaded but brittle, you've been saving because the shine distracts. A square of canvas from an old sack becomes stubborn reinforcement at the hem. You don't worry about patterns matching. The world has stitched. You long before hems ever did. The seams are a biography of improvisation. A coin pouch stitched sideways to hide the hole in the gown's pocket, a piece of curtain sewn into the sleeve to keep the chill out. When you pull the thread, the needle bites the skin at the base of your finger and you curse softly, more out of habit than pain. A boy passes under the window, high-stepping, his shoes slapping the mud. He drops a scrap of paper, a crude drawing of a ship, and scurries after his sister when you call his name. The sight of the child, so intent on play despite rot and hunger, slides against your hands and you almost fumble a stitch. You laugh quietly at yourself and get the seam back in order. Outside, muffled and immediate, there is the clang of a leather boot patrol, the watchmen on their rounds, and you press the chest closer as if to hide its contents. They are not interested in a woman mending a gown, but in the head of a gossip who owes money to half the taverns in the parish. Their voices carry talk of a man taken for theft, the squeal of a cart's wheel, a woman's high swear. You let the sound pass like a boat past a quay, close enough to feel the wake but not the wake's pull. Midway through, you find a small, stubborn nest of something at the shoulder seam. You pick it apart, hands precise from practice, and 3 little black specks tumble out, angry and walking. You flick them away into the light. They are tiny tyrants that leave you itchy for hours afterward. You think about burning the gown, about throwing it into the river and watching it swim away. But then you remember how many coins sit between you and tomorrow's bread, and how the world provides in meager, grimed shapes. A cart rattles by below, spilling a smell that is all fat and meat and the day's refuse. A dog sniffs at the gutter and lifts a leg. You go on stitching. The needle slides, the hemp groans, and your forearm tightens. There is a rhythm to it, your breath. The threads tug, the swearing under your breath when the thread knots. At one point, you miss the eye of the needle on purpose and thread the gown through with a loop less than ladylike but fast. You think about the young woman who left earlier this month, about how she took the comb and a set of spoons and left the bed empty. The gown will have to do both for her and for you now. You tie off the last stitch with a practiced knot and press your palm to the seam as if to smooth the lie. The patch holds. It looks a little ridiculous, a scandalous stripe of blue across the skirt, but from a distance it reads as character. Up close it reads as survival. A child's hand slips through the gap where the pocket has been made, and a coin clinks into the palm. The child blinks and runs. You tuck the coin into the patched man's pocket you sewed sideways for its security. There is a small, sharp satisfaction in that theft. It is not unlike patching the gown, small acts of reclamation stitched onto the larger, ragged garment of your life. You stand and the gown hangs differently now, the patched seams making you look leaner for all your long wear. The fabric squeaks against itself as you move, proof of age and improvisation. You shrug it across your shoulders one last time and feel the weight of history in the thread. Someone once told you that garments remember the hands that keep them. If that is true, then this dress carries the heat of 42 men and 3 winters and laughter that ricocheted off low beams. It will carry a few more things tonight. Before you leave, you pin a stolen ribbon to the bodice. It is garish and nearly indecent, but it serves the purpose of distraction. A bright eye where the eye should be drawn, away from holes and stains. You look at yourself in the narrow mirror propped against the chest, not because it flatters, but because you need to see that the person wearing this patchwork is still the one who negotiates, who smiles, who leaves with pockets lighter than she arrived. You step toward the door and catch your reflection in the black of the polished frying pan. The patched gown swishes. It is not pretty, and it never will be pretty in the way the court dresses are pretty. It is useful. It is warm enough. It is a map of decisions. You fold your hands, listen for the creak of the floorboard that betrays you to Mrs. Daveney below, and slip out into the street with your makeshift dignity, and a coin pressed warm in a pocket sewn sideways. You push the casement wide, and the street hits you like a punch to the face. A wall of warm, fetid air threaded with vinegar and dung, mingled with the sour perfume of spilled ale, and something sweetly rotten you'd rather not identify. The light that comes through is thin and yellow. A gull passes, cackling, and whatever dignity you had left about publicly airing your filth slinks away. You hook your elbows on the sill and stare down. The cobbles look like a river of mud and human business. Below, the gutter runs black and lively with other people's refuse. Above you, overhangs and latticed windows create a canyon where things fall with alarming frequency. Your hair is a nest. You know without looking how the knits hook under the thicker strands near your neck. You feel them scuttle when you tilt your head, a phantom itch that makes your mouth water with disgust. The comb is wooden and teeth-worn, pocketed in the hem of your apron. You pull it out. It's the tool you trust more than any man's promise, more reliable than counting coins in a cup of ale. You place the comb at the root and begin to work slowly, dragging it through the tangles, encouraging the tiny squat bodies to dislodge. Leaning further over the sill, you flick the comb. Black specks snap off and scatter into the open air like something half bird, half sin. The goal is simple: fling them into the void and let gravity and gutter do the rest. You tell yourself it's a mercy, better they plunge to be swatted by someone else's shoe than to nest closer to your scalp. But the truth is smaller, meaner. It is an economy of survival. Less on you, less to itch you, fewer reasons for a client to gag and leave mid-count. A scream, a woman below has just been surprised by a chamber pot, cuts the air. You jerk. A splash of yellow slaps the side of the building beneath where you stand. The smell is immediate, thick enough to taste. Someone on the other side of the street laughs, which is the city's reflex. Laughter and pity are interchangeable here. You duck. Another pot hurtles past, clanging against a wooden sign, shattering with a wet, satisfying sound. Little shards of ceramic and a filigree of urine arc through the air and land like confetti for the gulls. You curse and go back to combing. The lice cling stubbornly, as if they, too, have an investment in you staying. You pry at a stubborn mat near your ear with a fingernail and a cluster of nits comes free, alive and writhing. You shake them off into the street. Below, a urchin spots them falling, and with the small, immediate joy only a child knows, lunges and catches one between thumb and forefinger, then flicks it into his mouth because he thinks it's a seed. You're caught between wanting to shriek and wanting to laugh. Hunger makes small monsters of all of them. A cart rattles down the lane, wheels clattering like gallows steps. A milkmaid balances pails and yells at a stray dog that has decided her skirt looks like a great idea for a bed. The dog wriggles free, leaps, and collides with the cart. Milk sloshes, white and warm, drenching a man who had been enjoying a cigarette-light scrap of tobacco from a stranger's pipe. He spits and swears, wiping himself with a fist, his expression a private tragedy. You lose your grip on a puddle of lice-inspector's vinegar you've kept in a cracked bottle. It splashes out and rips a little halo of scent around your face, a small triumph. The vinegar does something to the lice. It makes them writhe and turn grayer, less eager to leap into hair. It does nothing to the pigeon that lands on your sill and proceeds to inspect your comb with the focus of a jeweler. Another projectile arc draws your attention. A chamber pot rope that was supposed to be lowered tidily has gone rogue. An apprentice below, called a scrub by his master, fumbles and the pot hits the edge of a gutter. It explodes in a theatrical burp of brown water. A woman on the opposite side of the street throws her apron across her head in a comically futile shield and keeps walking as if this is part of the day's choreography. You wipe your hand on your skirt, tasting the iron tang of sweat and vinegar. A gong farmer's wagon passes, slow and proud in its misery, the men on it more like ancient undertakers than laborers. They throw a pail of something into the cart with a noise like wet sacks. The stench from the wagon is ancestral, the smell of human waste so old and known that it hits a different place in your chest, sorrow mixed with the resigned humor of people who have lived long enough to call rotten things by their proper names. The wagon's driver nods at you with a face like a carved bone. You nod back because manners are armor. You consider shaving your head. In some quarters, people do. They take a razor and become less attractive to lice, but they also become a spectacle, a walking admission of poverty or of prudence that borders on shame. You tug at a loose lock, and a little army of mites tumble free and roll across the sill. One gets stuck in the crook of your wrist and stabs at your skin like a tiny, illicit tattoo. You pluck it off between your teeth and briefly imagine a life where your hair is braided and less prone to harboring economies of parasites. Daydreams are dangerous. They make you forget to duck. A shrill voice rings out. A constable is scolding a man for catcalling by the butchers. The man is wearing a coat 3 sizes too large and a hat with a feather that has seen better marriages. He tries to hand the constable a coin, and the constable pretends to refuse because the city enjoys its morality shows. The coin slips from the offending man's fingers and drops toward the gutter. You make a lightning decision born of long habit and reach to the ledge for balance. Your elbow nudges the comb loose. It arcs, spins, and disappears into the street. The urchin who had eaten the lice seed points at the comb like a boy who has discovered treasure. He picks it up, and the look he gives you is not pity but bargaining, an offering that says, "If you feed me, I will keep your secrets." You laugh, a sound at once bitter and clean. Laughter is lighter than the stench, and it throws your shoulders back with a sliver of pride. You lean out again, hair nearly. Combless, and use your fingers now, pinching, plucking, flicking. The wind carries a sieve of soot and ash into your face. It lands like a widow's veil across your lashes. You pick at a stubborn knit and it slips away, hopping into the dark like a tiny tramp. Below, someone curses at their cat. Above, a bell tolls 6, and the city tells you bodily that the afternoon will bring another batch of customers, another collection of smells and small violences. You take a breath, taste the city in the back of your throat, and finish the work as best you can. When you finally step away from the window, your scalp is raw and your hands smell of vinegar and desperation. The lice are fewer, not gone. That is the point, not to be victorious, but to be less hunted for a while. You gather your apron, pat your hair into a shabby bun, and turn toward the room where a fresh sheet of straw waits, where someone might knock on the door any minute, and where the small oddities of the street will repeat themselves with minor variations for as long as you last. You squat on the low stool by the single-shuttered window because sunlight costs nothing, and it's the only thing in the room that feels like an ally. The shutter lets in a narrow coin of light that outlines the dust motes and the curl of smoke from the neighbor's stew. On the floor beside the stool sits a wooden trencher, nicked, stained, ringed with the ghosts of many past meals. Into it you drop yesterday's bread, the crust gone leathery, the inside a stringy, dry rag. You press it down with the heel of your hand to make it swallow whatever liquid you're about to give it. The ale comes from a stubby bottle kept in the corner, sealed with old wax. It is small ale, the weak stuff brewed for daily drinking because the stronger brews are taxed into a luxury. You pour, and the bread sucks the ale like a thirsty thing. The liquid is pallid, like pond water that's been filtered through a sieve of hops. It smells of sour malt and a faint tang of vinegar. Yours is a people's breakfast, made to keep men and women from keeling over before noon. You tilt the trencher and the first mouthful hits the back of your throat, hot from the night before, but the heat is fake and comforting nonetheless. It muffles hunger with a dull sweetness and a bitter note that slides along your tongue like an apology. You eat with your fingers because knives are for the rich and for law-abiding shopkeepers. Your fingers are stained from yesterday's stew. The bread is damp enough to break apart between thumb and forefinger. Chewing, you count little triumphs. A soft patch that tastes almost fresh, a hard pebble that makes you wince, a tang that might be mold or might be the ale doing its trick to mask worse things. Each swallow is a little gamble. Sometimes it feels like your stomach is a bellows, and sometimes like a thrumming, anxious animal. You've learned the signs of bad food. A sudden shiver, a hollow gurgle in the gut, the slow, terrible chill that means you should have spat it out. Outside on the street, an incident unfolds like a bad play. A dog, mangy, one eye milky, darts under the shutter and makes a beeline for the trencher. You snatch it back with a curse, and the dog whines and fights the leash of fate. A boy's shout follows. Somebody's child has snatched your spare crust from the windowsill and is dancing down the lane like a triumphant criminal. You don't give chase. You can't spare the breath. Instead, you tear a sliver from the crust you still have, tuck it into the hem of your skirt, and press it into the hand of a small, snot-nosed urchin who's leaning on your threshold. His gratitude is immediate and loud. He runs off clutching the bread, dirt painting new lines across his face. You watch him go because it's the nearest thing to charity you can afford today. Every bite is accompanied by the soundtrack of the city. A cartwheel thuds outside. Someone is beating metal. A woman's voice climbs and turns, pleading into bargaining with the baker across the alley. Bakers run communal ovens here. Their hours and their favors are a form of currency. You can tell by the way the man from the bakery stands in the doorway with flour on his sleeves that he's arguing the cost of a loaf. In other times, you might have tried to charm him into a discount. Today, you have no teeth left for bargaining. You know the dangers. You've heard whispers in the yard, hushed and sharp as knives, about last month's turnips and the fever that followed. There are foods you avoid because they gamble with your life. There are customers you avoid because they bring not only coin but a blistering cough. This breakfast is a protective ritual. Watered ale is less likely to burn you with the hidden heat of booze. Soaking bread makes it easier on a stomach starved of fresh fare. It's a survival practice, not a pleasure. A short incident breaks your concentration. The landlady's voice booms up the stairwell, a sharp rasp like a bell. She's come to collect last week's rent and a promise of this week's. You slide the trencher under the stool as if hiding it will make the debt invisible. Her footfalls are heavy. There's the scrape of a chair, the clink of coins counted like a litany. You step to the doorway, tucking the corner of your blanket over your shoulder as a gesture of respect and apology. She looks you over with the generosity of someone who's never known real. "Want, you'll have until tonight," she says. It is a mercy that tastes like vinegar. The morning keeps offering little skirmishes. A pair of sailors stagger down the lane, arguing about a woman in a foreign port. They smell of tar and stale rum, and one of them lurches into the gutter and makes a mess that sets the neighbor's cat into high indignation. The other shoves his companion with the kind of force only men who have been at sea have. You feel the tremor of their laughter as if it were wind through a keyhole. If you had a coin, you might have given it for the spectacle. Instead, you finish your trencher, scrape it clean with the flat of your hand, and lick a smear of ale from your palm because the tiniest economies matter. There's a rhythm to these mornings. Eat quickly, make the bed of straw look less like a burial, muffle the smell under herbs, dress the wounds with vinegar if you have it, tuck a piece of chalk or a scrap of flannel into your pocket to barter later. You swallow the last of the soaked bread and feel the familiar ache, a hollow that no small meal can fill, but that small meals keep from becoming a chasm. You rise, the stool creaking like a complaint, and the trencher slips from your hands. It thunks on the floor and a rat skitters away, offended at being disturbed. As you tie your bonnet, you glance at a scrap of paper pinned to the wall, a notice about a new edict, words about cleanliness and virtue that will change nothing for you. The proclamations are for the ears of masters and magistrates. They do not consider what people like you actually have to do to eat. You step out into the lane with your tray tucked under your arm, the damp blanket folded over it, and the city breathes around you, smoke, yeast, the faint iron of old wounds. Breakfast has done what it can. It has given you warmth enough to walk, a pocket small and steady with strength, and the grim consolation that you're still in trade for another day. You hear them before you see them. A thudding on the stair, the hollow rattle of boots on worn wood, laughter that trips and lurches like a mast in a gale. The door bursts open and the room fills with wind and the smell of ship, tar and wet rope, brine baked into beards, the sour sweetness of vomit still clinging to one man's collar. They lean in crooked, anchors still in their shoulders, eyes bright with the glow of too much ale. Two of them, maybe three, depending on whether the fourth is still in the alley passed out on his back with his legs crossed like a child's. They blink at the smoky light, then at you, like animals that suddenly remember they were promised warmth. Hands rough. As knotted rope reach for your elbows, slide to your waist in a practiced, possessive way. Their skin is damp with sweat. The salt from 1,000 voyages crusts their fingernails. One coughs a hacking, tobacco-sounding cough, and you watch the wet thread of it land on the edge of the table and dry there in a sickly halo. You do a quick scan, teeth chewed down to yellow stumps, a tattoo of a mermaid on a forearm, a torn sleeve pinned with a bit of nail. None of them smell like someone who deserves your charity. They smell like money. They produce coins with theatrical slowness. You have seen these before, coins that ring different from the clinking of English silver. Large, blunt pieces stamped with foreign faces. Sun and shield ducats with bright gold glint flat copper pence with a greenish bloom crusted into their creases, a heavy slice of a Spanish 8-piece, so pitted it could be a fossil. They throw them on the table and let them roll, clatter like small metal storms. The largest one, the king of the bunch, is a Spanish piece of 8, nicked around the edge by countless transactions and possibly a few teeth. You do the arithmetic in your head as quickly as a prayer. A piece of 8 can buy you a week's worth of porridge at the worst, if you can get it changed for English coin without losing half to a hawker. But it is never straightforward. Foreign coin here means bargaining with men who deal in clipped shillings and dubious promises, or leaning on a broker at the quay who will admire the shine while waiting for you to sign away value for the privilege of being left with English copper. You keep your face neutral. You have learned that expressions are currency too. One of the sailors, the one with the mermaid, grins with a mouth half missing and speaks in a slurred accent that still carries the cadence of far coasts. 8 of those, he says, tapping the piece with a finger thick as a bone. That'll see us to breakfast and a bed. You counter with a price that is not nothing, not to be insulted. They bark and haggle like merchants. You let them prattle. Every tale about monsters in the hold or golden sands at the equator is another chance to count the coins in your palm. When negotiation turns shaky, you pull a trick. You produce a little weight of your own, a small English groat hidden up your sleeve, and lay it beside their foreign pride. They snarl and lean forward, mischief and menace braided into their breath. One of them tries a sleight of hand, palming a smaller coin to your hand like it's a teat to a suckling babe. You catch it. You let your fingers brush theirs with the kind of calm that makes insinuation look like threat. Their eyes narrow. For a moment, you consider smacking the fool, but the law is naked and heavy and more likely to clobber you for a disturbance than him. So instead you implement a milder violence, a bargain that takes the edge off their courage. You accept the coin, but not before marking it with a scar of your own, a tiny nick into the metal with a nail you keep for such times. No money changer trusts a coin twice without seeing where you came by it. A nick is your signature, a private claim. 2 short things happen while you sort the exchange. A child whose face is thin as a wafer slips into the doorway carrying a basket of oranges, hawking them in a voice that tries for cheer but sours in the second syllable. One sailor waves him off with a dirty hand. The boy stumbles, the basket jerks, an orange rolls and hits the floor and pops. You stoop on reflex and push the orange back into the crate, exchange a smile that is both pity and warning. The child nods like a rabbit and slips away before the sailor can remember he exists. Then a scuffle spills from the next room, 2 burly dockers arguing over a debt. One throws an empty mug, the other answers with a knife flashed like a lit candle. The sailors go rigid, hands reaching for belts, but you keep the room small and intimate, talking slow so none of them feel the need to prove themselves. The knife clinks on the floor in the hallway, footsteps, curses, then silence. You and the sailors both pretend not to hear the neighbor's argument. It's safer that way. You examine the coins again. 1 ducat is in fact a Dutch piece, thin and stamped with a windmill, its silver washed in ocean soft. Another is a clipped bit, its edges uneven like the teeth of a bad dog. You know a money changer will look at these and laugh you down, maybe cheat you with a scale or a small apothecary's trick. There's also the ever-present risk a coin has been used to prop open a lock during theft. Sometimes keeping a foreign coin is like keeping a secret. It buys you a night of safety, but also invites trouble if discovered at the wrong end of a constable's chain. You make your choice. For now, you will accept them. But not blindly. You flip a coin between your fingers as if it's a toy, feel the edge, check the weight, and tuck it into a small pouch above your left hip. It drops against your skin like a dry seed. "I'll take 2, you say, naming the price that means the sailor gets what he's after and you get paid enough to paper over a dozen tiny worries. Rent, garlic for the stew. A cheap tonic no apothecary will swear by. When they settle, the room shifts. The talk becomes low as if underwater. You let laughter bubble. For a sentence, the way a woman will let a man think he's won something, and then you insist on the rules. No breaking of bones, no bargains made with knives, and a coin left on the table until the work is done. They grumble but agree. One of them snores less like sleep and more like a kettle, and you feel the ache of 1,000 such mornings in your own shoulders. A rat, bold as a pickpocket, slips through a crack at the base of the hearth and sniffs at the coins you've left for counting. You clap a hand and startle it. It squeaks and darts, carrying off a small copper with it like a pirate claiming booty. One sailor curses and stabs at it with his boot, but rats are faster than rage. That image, a rat fleeing with your money, will stay with you as a private assault on the day's accounting. Before the night's business becomes the morning's work, you wash your hands in a basin you keep by the window. The water is cold and smells faintly of onions, leftover from a stew someone boiled to forget his hunger. You rub the smell into your sleeves and then into the linen, and when you return, the sailors are arranging themselves like men who will soon fall into sleep like drunks into a net. You money count in the dim, tuck the pouch away, and already plan where to take those coins. The key broker who owes you fewer debts, the washerwoman who will swap you fresh linen for a ducat and a joke, or the hidden chest under your pallet where you keep the day's spoils until you can afford to risk them in daylight. They leave smelling of tar and salt and tomorrow. You close the door on them and on the smell, and the room feels suddenly like a small clear deck after a storm strewn with tiny detritus, sticky with ale, but safer for the moment. You listen to their footsteps fade, the gulls ranting in the dusk outside, and count the coins under your breath, like a woman saying her rosary. There is money in the pouch. There is also a bruise on your arm where one of them gripped too tight. You wrap a scrap of linen around it like a pact with yourself. This life takes and it pays, and one must be clever in what one accepts. You duck beneath a low lintel and into heat that hits like a hand on the back of your neck. The bagnio swallows you whole. Steam hangs in ropes from the rafters, beads of water drip from the thatch, and the air tastes of boiled leather and lavender someone tried to drown the smell of rot with. Your skin prickles at once from the warmth and relief. For an hour at most, you will be a different person, or at least slightly less coated in. Last night's sweat and ale. The tubs are wooden barrels lined up like a dowager's teeth. Men and women sit shoulder to shoulder in the highest-priced room. The sign on the door says mixed, but it's really a negotiation of quiet glances and elbow jostles. You keep your wrapper gathered to your knees and climb into a tub. The water is tepid at the surface, too hot at the bottom. When you sink, the wood breathes. Your joints unclench. The cloudiness hits you first. It's not grime alone. It's the blur of skin oils, soap scum made from tallow and lye, loose hairs, and something darker you try not to think about. Fingers skim the surface and leave rings. A child, maybe 8, filthy hair plastered to his skull, paddles through the legs of the bathers like a practiced gull, his small hands cupping the water. He's hired by the keeper to fetch fresh water and warm the next tub, but you watch his eyes. Quick, hungry, practicing the lift of a wallet no bigger than a flap of leather. You dip your face. The splash is sharp and awakens a memory of river water running over your bare ankles in better days. It also stings the sore behind your ear where the scab refuses to settle. You cough whiskey sour from a man in the next tub who laughs too loud and tips his head back. He smells of tallow candles and cheap wine. His breath carries the ghost of last week's beef. He tries to flirt with a woman across from him and gets instead a basin in the face. A small, precise flick with a crust of soap that leaves a white smear on his cheek. The room laughs like a single throat. The bathhouse keeper, a broad woman with a chest like 2 kettles and a scar that runs from brow to jaw, pads between tubs. She moves like a captain diffusing a mutiny. When she wants someone quiet, she places a wooden spoon on their tub and they cup their hands to their mouths and drink instead of shouting. She takes coins with one hand and tucks them into a leather pouch under her apron with the other. Her presence is a kind of law here. Everyone knows the price of trouble is a dunking and a bruise, and she's had a long apprenticeship in both. A side incident. A sailor too drunk to navigate his own knees staggers, slips, and slaps his thigh against the tub. His oath rolls out of him like thunder. Two men near him shout, hands thrown up, and one, thin as a reed, pops him on the ear with a wet towel. The sailor, suddenly sobered by pain, apologizes to everyone except his own shame. He pays for a reed pipe, coughs black tobacco into the water beside your knee, and mumbles about a wife back in Bristol who's probably remarried. Another small thing unfolds at the edge of your vision. A woman near the door, wrapped in a shawl that smells of camphor, lifts her skirt and presses a coin into the grubby hands of the child who fetches towels. He beams like the sun has chosen him. The woman's face is pinched. She's been marked by someone else's teeth. There's a lip scar half healed where a lover lost patience. She tilts her head and asks you a soft question about a poultice for a burning rash. You whisper she should try mashed bread and yeast, and she nods like you've handed her a small, priceless secret. The water keeps close, as if it's hungry for more company. You try not to look directly at the open wound atop a man's shoulder. Instead, you find yourself watching the way the steam maps his beard. Steam outlines every pore, every small geography of human trouble. Someone sighs into the vapor, and for a second the whole room is a chorus of weary lungs. Your own sigh is small and private. You scrub at the place where lice cling like tiny conspirators and pull off a tangle of hair that snaps between your fingers. There is a scent here that always surprises newcomers. Vinegar and rosemary, the perfuming remedies of people with not enough coin for better medicine. The keeper tosses a handful of rosemary into the corner cauldron, and the herb hisses and curls into the air. If you're lucky, that aroma will sit beneath the stink for the rest of the day, like a polite lie. Around you, conversation is low, often practical, always economical with truth. A man discusses the debt he owes to a pawnbroker. A woman asks another if she's heard the news about the plague in the eastern wards. The other shakes her head and says only, "Not yet, but the rats are nearer every week." Your fingers remember counting coins like prayers. You fold your wrapper like you fold your life, quick, neat, and without ceremony. A final side incident occurs when the door flies open and a constable strides in, his face flushed and his beard wet from the rain outside. He looks the room over as if measuring who will be useful to the magistrate. A couple of men scramble for their clothes. A young lad, no more than 14, hides behind a tub, nose pressed to oak, and you hold your breath for him as if you can hold the world from hurting him. The constable's eyes skim past you. For now, you are a shadow in a darker place. He mutters about licenses, about a new edict that might close houses like these unless the keeper pays a fine that will take months to earn. No one answers. The steam swallows the exchange as if it never happened. You take the last of your cleansing ritual, a coarse cloth and more soap, rubbed in circles until your palms hurt. The lie stings a welt. You haven't noticed before, and for a flash you wonder whether the washing makes you less marked or only reveals the marks more clearly. You pull yourself out of the tub and stand on the wooden plank, water sluicing down your legs in narrow streams that carry the room with them back into the drains. You feel lighter by inches, not absolved but momentarily less burdened. When you step to the bench to dress, someone passes a bit of bread around. You make a show of nibbling, mindful of how necessity turns charity into community. The child slips behind you and with the speed of small, starving creatures, lifts a coin from your wrapper. You feel the cold brush and instead of anger, you let them have it. There's a shared economy here. Sometimes a coin in a child's pocket buys you the comfort of knowing they won't be in the gutters tonight. You leave the bagnio smelling faintly of rosemary and other people's sweat. The clouds of steam cling to your hair like a rumor, and as you step back into the street, the cold hits like the honest part of the day. Outside, the Thames is gray and sluggish, and the world resumes its business of filth and trade. You feel cleaner, yes, but also keenly aware that the water you swam in was a bargain made among strangers. Brief warmth in exchange for shared disease, for borrowed comfort, and the small, necessary thefts of a child. You fold that knowledge into your skirts like another patch and walk on. You are called in like a suspect. The madam sits at the head of the long room beneath a blackened beam, candle smoke forming a permanent halo above her head. Her gown is thrifted finery, too many ruffles for her age and the faint smell of burnt sugar clinging to the fabric. She keeps a pewter cup of something sour-sweet at hand, a cloth-wrapped bundle of herbs, and a small mirror that catches the light and looks like a coin someone polished for use in a pinch. When she notices you hesitating, she snaps a hand toward the stool. "Show me," she says. The word is blunt like a knife, it makes you sit. Her inspection is business, not malice. It is calculation. In these rooms, flesh and reputation are currency, and she is the one who makes the exchange. She wants to know what she can sell you for. First, the mouth. She has a set of small, practiced movements. She tilts your chin, leans close, and breathes in like someone smelling a pot to see if it's burned. Her fingers are dry and a little crumbed at the nails, evidence of both hard work and nervous picking. She parts your lips with a thumb and forefinger. The inside of your cheeks is ash gray where you chew tobacco or grind down bread into a paste. Your gums are thin, the line between pink and black dotted with stains. A molar has given up the fight and caved inward. She presses on it with the tip of her finger. A sweat bats at your temple. She sniffs, not unkindly. "Bad teeth," she says, the words flat. "That'll shave off a shilling from the high night." Her currency is not sentimental. She checks for more than teeth. She presses the nail of her index finger against your lower gum and watches your face. If you wince, she notes the discomfort. It means infection, and infection scares away better-paying men. If you clench and your jaw trembles, she makes a mental tick beside your name in the ledger she keeps in a battered leather book. The ledger has been stitched and patched until it looks like it might fall apart any day. It never does. Next are the nails, which she regards almost like a jeweler appraising a gem setting. She turns your hands, looking at the moons of the nails and the ridges in the meat beneath. Clean nails mean you have not been scrubbing coppers or hauling wet laundry for someone else. Bitten nails mean impatience or nervous habits. Dirty nails mean work in the gutters. She pulls at the cuticle with a small blade to see if there are splits or hangnails that would show poorly when holding a glass. The blade nicked your skin once when you were new. The scar still puckers. She presses a cloth into the web between your thumb and forefinger. If the cloth finds grit or a smell like stale wheat, she frowns. That's the smell of the mill hands. And the mill hands pay in coin but bring fleas and stories of wives who scream. Her fingers are thorough. She runs them along your knuckles, feeling for swelling or stiffness that would mark you as someone who breaks easily. Clients expect nimble hands. They expect the ability to laugh and be soft in the bed, not to throw up at the sight of a sore. You swallow. Her fingertips come back warm with your skin's dust and salt. The skin is the final and most dreaded reading. She holds a candle and brings you forward so the waxlight can pick up the faintest sheen. Shadows reveal pox pits, ringworm rings invisible in dim rooms, and the glossy sheen of a fresh sore. She parts your skirts, fingers nimble and unembarrassed, tasting the economy of your body as if she were assessing a horse. "Stand," she says, and you comply. She looks at the inside of your thighs where chafing and smears from ointments map out the past month's history. At the hollow of your neck for the godforsaken pannage of nits, at your wrists for the dust of work. She squints. She pinches your arm and watches how the skin snaps back. Poor elasticity can mean sickness. A dense, doughy feel can mean water retention or worse. She has remedies as she finds faults. For a slight cough, she will hand over a sprig of horehound to be chewed. For foul breath, there is a coin-size cloth soaked in vinegar, lemon rind tucked into the inner arm to mask it. For sores, she offers a poultice of bread and plantain leaves, of which she is fond, or a dip in hot water mixed with ale and herbs when there's coin to spare. But remedies are rationed. If she deems you too costly an infirmity, she moves you aside. There is always a basket for those put out of circulation for a day or a week, a damp pallet, watered ale, and one of the older women assigned to keep watch and whisper about your prospects. While she works, you might glance around the room. The scullery girl unties a man's boots in the corner and curses. A man coughs loud and awkward in the next bed, a sound like someone trying to dislodge a cat from his throat. Down the narrow lane, someone is retching into a gutter. He has had too much heat and honey wine, and the sound of his heaving makes the candle flame shiver. A rat slips across the hearthstone with a scrap of bread twice its size and disappears beneath a stool like a secret. These incidents are brief. They fold into the inspection as background color, the everyday theater of this house. Once she's done, she names the price, not with warmth. She says plainly, "You're fit for the afternoon crowd, not the merchants, not the captain." It's a sentence and a verdict. She jots something in the ledger, quick black strokes, and the scratch of her quill tastes like salt in your mouth. If she is in a merciful mood, she will hand you a small bit of almond paste to chew so your breath will be less like the wash house. If she is cruel, she will laugh and tell you to fetch water and scrub for 2 hours before the first caller. Once, she swatted the younger girl behind you with a broom for showing a dirty wrist to a visiting sergeant. The girl only cried for as long as it took to pull herself up. Sometimes small incidents rearrange the order. A client at the door who smells of strong oil and coin. A constable who pauses at the threshold looking for someone else and asks after a name. An apprentice who runs in with a news snippet about a ship in the harbor, and the madam's eyes brighten, because sailors bring better coin and worse diseases. She notices everything because she has to. Her livelihood depends on knowing whether a single night's gain will bankrupt the house. When you rise to leave, she passes your face again like a hawker measuring the weight of a cloth with 2 fingers. "Mind your mouth," she warns. "Mind your inked names and your nails. We keep what we can sell." You stand with your chest tight. The inspection is over, but the verdict hums in you like a worm. You take the lemon rind she hands you, chew it until your tongue hurts, and step back into the lane where the smell of brine and horse sweat punches the air. You are priced and labeled and set to work. Your value this day bought and the coin to be counted later. You hear him before you see him. The sound is a slow, determined percussion, heavy boots on uneven cobbles, the metallic clink of a staff against iron hoops, a voice clearing itself into commands. Lantern light cuts across the wet walls in a drunken arc. For a breathing, living second you imagine stepping out, making a courtesy and flashing a smile. Then your fingers tighten on the wooden beam behind the tavern door, and you press your back into the cold, damp plaster. The alley is a narrow throat between 2 houses where everything useful is discarded. Rags hang on a line like dejected flags. A barrel exudes a dark perfume of rotten cabbage and vinegar. The puddle at your feet reflects the lantern like a small, wagging sun. You fold yourself into the shadow beside a heap of straw and old boots, feeling the prick of splinters, smelling the sour fat of burned tallow and the sweet, sickly smell of spilled ale. Your skin remembers every scrap and bruise because it has to. Your body catalogs survival in dull pain and sharper compromises. You are not alone. 5 other women breathe in the same muffled cadence. A child, maybe no older than 10, sits huddled under a bench clutching a rag doll, its eyes scabbed and hair matted. She drops a coin into the child's palm without looking, a small concession that's part pity, part strategy. The child keeps quiet and is useful for lookouts. A stray dog gives a single, low whine and curls into your lap, its ribs a map under thin fur. You stroke it because petting something soft makes your hands forget the calluses and the pinching of coin purses. The constable comes with the law's swagger, wearing a leathern badge that catches the lantern, and sends a tiny, accusing gleam into the alley. He wears a broad collar, his face netted with smallpox scars that make him look like a map of someone else's sins. He smells of vinegar and stale smoke. His eyes sweep, slow and practiced, like someone reading a book he knows by heart but cannot bear to love. You calculate, where will he stop? Will he notice the flutter of a sleeve under the stair? Will he take his time by the alehouse and count purses? Talk loudly about morals so the tavern keepers have time to shove bodies into the back rooms. Prostitution in this parish is a tolerated menace, so long as it pays the right hands and keeps respectable mouths closed. Then suddenly you hear the slap of coin on wood and a voice cajoling in a lower register. The bawd, her apron thick with other people's. Troubles has pulled out a few coins and is speaking with the constable at the corner. You see the constable's manner soften like old leather in the rain. A low arrangement is made. The watch will look, but look away. Business continues until it does not. The bawd's laugh rattles your teeth, except it doesn't always work. A sharp cry slices through the muffled air. One of the girls further down the lane has been seen speaking too loudly to a soldier, offering herself for a coin and a laugh, and the soldier, drunk and itching for virtue, has tattled. The constable's head snaps toward the sound. He moves like an animal that smells wrong meat. Two men seize the girl by the elbows. Her legs kick. Her skirt rips in a sound like tearing parchment. You see white of knuckles, the flush of new terror staining her cheeks. That sound, the sound of a body being dragged, stitches into your chest. Bridewell means a broom and a whip. The stocks mean humiliation with a side of rain. You swallow and pull your shawl closer. A street boy hurries by selling oranges, his voice high and useless. He drops a fruit, and it rolls across the stones straight into the path of the constable. The watchman stoops to pick it up, more because he likes the feel of things to be in order than because he wants the orange. The boy blurts out a story about having been pushed, about a thief in the crowd. For a moment the constable is amused. The alley holds a small, ridiculous theater. Then someone from the tavern shouts that a sailor has pissed on the stoop. The constable spins. Drunkenness is a public offense. Indecency is a small arrow that will often find a butt to pierce. The sailor is hauled off with curses about sea lipstick and whore's tricks. You press your nose to the crate. The wood smells of hops and old sweat. From somewhere, a lute tinkles off-key, a tavern song that keeps a dozen men bracing themselves for the night ahead. The constable's shadow passes. It is long and thin with the lanterns wavering. The air grows colder as if the world itself is holding its breath. You feel every tiny insect scuttle in the straw, every ebb and swell of someone's sleeve. A woman next to you makes a soft cough, purely instinctive, nothing more, but it carries. Heads turn like reeds in a storm. The constable's footfalls slow until they are a single, heavy instrument on the ground. You remind yourself of the trade-off. A bribe buys a night. A wrong look fetches a morning in chains. You know the stories of women sent to distant houses of correction, made to labor at a loom until their fingers bled. Of boys branded as thieves for taking what was left on a windowsill. You know the names of the places men use as threats: Bridewell, the pillory, the whipping post, like spiteful gods invoked to frighten children. And yet somewhere in the alley's cramped geometry, life refuses to stop. A quarrel sparks over a stolen coin. Two women almost break into laughter as a man boasts of his imagined conquests, so proud of his bruises he forgets he's supposed to be ashamed. A woman hustles past with a tray of gin cups and spills a drop that scatters like stars on the cobbles. It glints in the lantern like a promise that is never fulfilled. The constable moves on. The lantern bobs and dwindles. You let out a breath you did not know you were holding. Your knees buckle. For a second you consider sobbing, not from fear but from the ridiculous weight of staying upright. A hand, calloused and quick, presses another coin into yours. Nobody here wastes words on grace. They give what they have. You tuck the metal against your skin like a talisman. When you finally step back into the street, you adjust the hideaway in your apron, an artisanal practice of concealment. A handkerchief rolled with a secret coin, a pin in the hem to signal a safe customer, a fold in your cuff known only to the women of your alley. The night hums with business. The constable's lamp swings somewhere behind you, a reminder that toleration is a thin skin over a blunt instrument. You can live under it, you can get used to the weight, but one day someone will kick it off and you will know the taste of cold iron and public shame. For now, you count your breaths, steady your hands, and step forward. The world wants a currency it can trade: silence, obedience, coin, and you have learned how to make change. The constable's shadow shrinks with his lantern as he turns a corner. You walk on, keeping to the edges, keeping to the dim, and thinking like everyone who has ever survived. Never be the one who laughs the loudest, never be the one who keeps the loudest company, and always, always keep a coin folded next to your heart. You step out into the noonday glare, and the city hits you like a hand to the face. Heat presses the linen to your skin. The sun turns cobbles into plates of hot iron. Your body feels like it's been in a long, low oven since dawn, clammy, sticky in the hollows of your knees, the back of your neck slick with something that smells of old cheese and iron. It's the kind of smell that lingers in the folds of cloth and in the hollow behind your ear, no matter how many times you go at it with a thimble of water and a handful of thyme. There's no privacy for bathing, and anyway the river is a rumor of grubby glass and floating refuse, so you do what you can. You keep a small glass vial tucked beneath your bodice, wrapped in a scrap of wool to stop it rattling against the bones of your ribcage. It's not a luxurious thing, no glittering Venetian bottle with a silver stopper. It's a beaten apothecary vial someone gave you in exchange for a night's work. A cheap spirit steeped with petals and clippings, a little sweat sweet and a little alcohol bite. The maker called it orange flower water. Someone else swore it contained rose oil. You have no idea. What you do know is that a fleck of it behind each ear convinces folk you have not been rolling in the gutter. You twist the cork, tilt the vial, press a droplet onto the skin behind your left lobe. The scent blooms, sugared blossom, and an alcoholic sting that momentarily sits on top of the city's rot. You smear it with 2 fingers, then tap the same behind your right ear. The warmth of your skin wakes it up. The sweetness becomes something bodily, almost warm enough to fool the nose for a little while. You slide your fingers along the hairline to carry a whisper of it forward. The scent doesn't last long, because bodies and streets conspire to repaint the air, but it buys you a margin, a pocket of something clean in a kingdom of filth. The chemical sting of the spirit lifts away the sharp edge of perspiration, the acidic, sour, animal smell that announces long hours and many bodies. Flecks of dust come off your sleeve like confetti when you rub. A fly bold as a small god stumbles across the glossy bead on your flesh. You clap at it and miss, cursing under your breath. For a few paces you feel like a different person, arranged, deliberate, a commodity that's been wiped clean for sale. The little ritual steadies you. It is not vanity, it is currency. From the alley to your left a cart creaks, overloaded with hides from the tannery. The stench of curing flesh slaps at the perfume and the 2 scents wrestle. You catch a whiff of lime and urine and think about the man who boiled hides up the stairs in your building. You think too about the apprentices who stand by the gate, faces smudged, waiting for coin. One of them mistakes the momentary bloom of blossom for a better kind of life and whistles. Side incident. A boy, dirty as a chimney sweep and smelling of spilled beer, drops a pocket mirror in the street. It spins, bounces, and a sliver of glass peels off. He howls, not for the mirror but for the coin inside it. A passing gentleman, staggering after his dinner, stomps the boy's hat into the mud and mutters something about mendicants. The boy scrapes himself off and slips into a doorway, clutching nothing but the memory of the mirror's shine. That flash of tin glass makes you think of your own reflection, always a performance, often betrayed. A pair of apprentice tailors swagger by, their belts heavy with bobbins. One reaches toward you with a grin and a crude rhyme on his lips. You give him a look that costs you nothing and shuts him up. The other laughs too loud and gets a cuff from a passing woman, someone else's matron, hands like iron. The city is full of small, sharp corrections. They keep the chaos fenced. You move through these micro-battles with the perfume doing its work. Men who approach you sniff experimentally, tilt their heads, and decide, sometimes, that you will do. Sometimes they smell the perfumed pretense and are cheered by it because for a few coins they can buy a story. That you are someone who remembers how to curl a sleeve, who once slept in linens that were lighter than linen, who smelled like flowers in a painting. There is profit in suggestion. There is power in a scent. There is also danger. Side incident. A magistrate's sergeant, officials in stark leather and worse temper, begins a round of surprise inspections of houses of ill repute. He is a man who thinks scandal is a kind of tax he can collect on the truth. You watch him from a distance, taste vinegar at the back of your throat though you haven't taken any. He stops at a neighbor's threshold, bellies forth threats that ripple down the street. Women gather at windows to count his teeth. You consider whether your little vial will keep him satisfied, or if you'll have to offer him something else to keep his hands out of your till. The perfume is not only for customers. It's for you to cloak the knowledge that you have been jostled and pressed, and that your underclothes might still bear sweat marks from a man who smelled of tobacco and salted fish. It is for the sense in your own gut that if a new scent does not arrive, something worse will, an infection or a landlord's notice or a rumor that makes customers disappear. You dab again behind the collarbone, as if scent woven into the skin can weave you a new fate. You pass the fishmonger's stall and the whole air shifts, brine and the bright cut of lime. A dog leaps at a dropped scrap. The perfume curls and dies as the dog's breath hits it. Your confidence deflates a little. You move on. The trick is to treat the scent like a lamp. Keep it lit, do not douse it, and know where the matches are. A woman ahead of you coughs and spits. The sound is flinty and old, and for a moment you worry it will settle behind your ears like grit. You brush it away with another application, the tiny bottle warm against your palm. The apothecary's cheap essences will not save you from what ails the body, but they purchase you anonymity in the human marketplace. A split second where no one sniffs out your real wear, and no one asks why your hands tremble when a coin is heavier than expected. At midday the street is awash of noise and commerce. You feel your edges sharpen, the way a blade does when it has been cared for. The scent gives you an opening for the afternoon, enough of a pretense that your next hour can be sold. That's how the day moves, one small illusion after another, each bought and paid for with a coin that never seems to sit long in your palm. You tuck the vial back under your bodice and tuck your chin. It is time to work. The perfume lasts a while, a lie that smells like roses and spirits. It will fade as all lies do, and then you will work to conjure the next. But for now, behind your ears, there is a bloom. You straighten your shoulders and become the thing a stranger wants to imagine. You wake to a chorus of aches that start at your ribcage and bloom outward. It takes a heartbeat for the memory to arrive. A hulking man, too much wine, hands that thought force was a compliment. Your side is a map of throbbing purple crescents. Your hip sprouts an eddy of black and blue like dried fruit. You roll onto your back and the mattress groans, the old springs hiccuping under your weight. The room smells of stale smoke, boiled oats, and something coppery that belongs to you. There is no time for sentiment. You swing your legs over the bed and the world tilts. You steady yourself by the rickety table and eye the small chest where you keep what counts for medical supplies. Linen strips are folded there, washed once when you had coin, now thin and stiff. You pull them free and they make a soft, papery sound like pages being turned. You run your fingertips over the fabric and wince. When you press on a bruise, you taste metal in your mouth. First, cleaning. There is a shallow basin in the corner, an heirloom from a woman who left for a better life and took her good silver jug with her. The basin is cracked, but it will do. You fetch water from the pump downstairs, carrying it in a bucket weighted with the knowledge that you'll have to climb 2 flights of stairs if you want extra. Outside, a cart rattles past, someone selling herrings. The smell seizes the moment and forces you to breathe through the wound rather than through your nose. You pour the water into the basin, then reach for the bottle of vinegar you keep under the bed. Vinegar is useful for everything. Stinking garters, the smallpox scabs the neighbor boastfully points at when you pass, and cleaning flesh. You dab a strip of linen into the sour liquid and press it to the deepest bruise. The tartness bites. You hiss and a cough escapes you. Vinegar pulls at the bruise as if trying to peel it clean from your skin. Beside the vinegar sits a jar of honey packed with thick, old honey that darkened to molasses during a hard winter. You scoff at the luxury and scoop out a spoonful with your fingernail. Honey draws out infection and keeps a bandage from shifting. Old women have sworn by it since before your grandmother was born. You rub the honey into the ragged edge of a split skin where the client's ring caught you, and the sweetness holds a moment of absurdity in an otherwise sour morning. The smell of it mixes with vinegar and your own salt sweat until the room becomes an uneasy compote. You lay a strip of dampened linen over the wound and wind a second strip over it. The linen bites into your skin when you pull it tight, but you prefer bite to bleed. You twist the end and tuck it under, then press your palm against the knot until the pain subsides to a manageable hum. The fabric speaks in threads. Old stitches, an echo of everyone who ever worked with linen in this city. You are both patient and sure. You have patched girls with worse, girls who kept laughing through the bandaging, because laughing made the ache smaller for a breath. A rat scurries across the boards, thump, thump, carrying with it the sound of a life less tidy. It pins you to the present because rats mean fleas and fleas mean itching. You wave a rag and the rat vanishes, but the itch in your scalp starts like a small, traitorous laughter. You ignore it. There is no time to chase vermin today. You move on to the bruises along your ribs. You borrow a trick from the cobbler across the alley, warm up a ceramic shard in the oven, your oven that usually bakes the leftover crusts the landlord tosses at you, and press it briefly against the swollen patches. The heat makes your skin go hot and then pins the pain to the place with a dull flare, forcing your breath to slow. It is not a cure, but heat sometimes resets your nerves so you can pretend the pain is a story that passed, not a companion that will sit with you through the day. A shout from the street interrupts you, a constable barking at a man for not paying his tavern reckoning. The man answers with a curse and is taken off with a hand on his collar. You smile without joy. You know the constable can be bought, like everything else. You reach for your small spice tin and crush a few leaves of comfrey between your fingers. Comfrey is called knitbone by women on the ward, and it smells like damp hay. You rub the crushed leaves into a paste with a bit of the honey and spread it over the tender skin. It cools. When the cold hits the bruise, you almost laugh at the relief. There's a brief side incident. Through the thin shutters, you see the baker's daughter stumble by, her apron smeared with flour and a cockle of laughter on her lips. She trips over a gutter stone and you hear the hitch of her breath. She rights herself, cheeks pink, and moves on. It warms something in you that is ashamed to be warmed. Another quick interruption. A peddler of miracle plasters knocks, hawking his wares, for sores, for burns, for the small pox. He drums his wooden tray against the sill. You throw a scrap of bread and he takes it, tipping his hat. Inside his cloth bag, he has a round of plaster made from animal fat and charcoal. You nod and buy a small disc with the last of the groats in your purse. The plaster sits on your palm like a promise, little, greasy, dubious. But promises are the currency of your life. You press the plaster across a bruise that stubbornly refuses to lie flat. It adheres with the sound of cloth to skin. The smells of fat and soot mingle with honey and vinegar and grease from your hands. You close your eyes and picture the man who left you like a bad coin. In your imagination, you fold him into a purse and forget to pay him. The fantasy does not stop the aching, but it loosens the throat tightness into a wider, more tolerable shape. Binding is a ritual. You step into the act like a woman dressing for cold, methodical, efficient. You pad the bruises with soft strips, tuck the ends like an old sailor tying off a rope, and tie knots that will hold through the day's motions. Linen hugs your body and the knots keep secrets. You don't bother with neatness. Practicality guides you. A loose tie means another tug at the shoulder, another moment of exposure in the company of a man too greedy for time. The last knot is snug. You test it with a breath and a flex. The pain dulls into a constant companion who has been shown the door and left outside to pace. You feel absurdly proud. In another life, the same steadiness would have mended a collarbone for a child who'd fallen from a cart. Here, steadiness keeps you in the room, and the room keeps you from the street where worse deals are struck. You stand and water your fingers under the cold tap, splashing away the residue of salves and sweat. The linen strips cling a little damp to your skin, and the room smells of many things. Vinegar, honey, the faint metallic trace that tells you where the worst hit you. You gather the waste and wrap it in an old rag, then toss it under the bed where the landlord's eyes seldom go. You take a last look at yourself in a cracked plate, pale, streaked, a smear of honey at the corner of your mouth, and allow a small, private smile. The body has a habit of surviving things that are supposed to break it. You will limp when you walk out, and you will accept the pity of a passing seamstress who offers a stitch and a sympathetic look. You will patch yourself again tomorrow if the need arises. For now, the linen holds, the honey keeps infection at bay, and your knots keep you wrapped in something like order. Outside, life goes on. The herring cart's bell grows fainter as it rolls away, the peddler's shout dwindles, and somewhere someone collapses into a drunken sleep. You stack your wares, smooth your dress over the bandages, and move through the room with the careful balance of someone who knows how to make pain useful. You step into the doorway and take a breath that tastes of vinegar and honey, and will be gone in a gulp of fresh, indifferent air. You slip through the low door into the back room where the other women gather, because a safe bed is not the only thing on the docket this morning. The space smells of smoke and boiled cabbage, of sour cloth and the lingering musk of bodies too long without sun. A single tallow candle gutters on the table, its flame bobbing under a blackened chimney. You set your cup down beside it and settle onto a stool scarred with rings and teeth marks, letting the small warmth of the flame chase the chill from your fingertips. Conversations pause, eyes flick to you. You nod and they begin again, voices soft as if the walls have ears. In this trade, knowledge is coin and gossip is a kind of ledger. You lean in because the news you bring might mean the difference between coin and contagion. Old Tom's got a sore on his lip again, Marrow says first, rubbing the back of her hand across her cheek as if wiping the smell away. Her voice is flat, she's seen too much. He comes every Friday, used to pay with a watch, now he passes copper and stares at you like a man who's lost his manners. You ask what it looks like, and she brings her thumb to her forefinger, pinching as if shaping a small, puckered thing. Weeping, smells like rot in the mouth, drinks a lot, stays longer than a sensible man. You file it away. Tom's name goes into the margin of your mind, a void and less desperate. Beside you, Betsy snorts. Safe, 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 she repeats in a sing-song that means the opposite. There's Master Alden pays well, but takes his time and asks about your family all the while, keeps a thin smile. Married, of course. She jerks her chin toward the alley where the early light is beginning to pale. If he comes here, we go for the payment up front, no exceptions, and never alone with him when the constable's known to be about. The women have their own way of naming danger. They call the pox the great stain, the sores marks, and a man prone to more than his share of putrid wounds a blighter. You listen for the telltale signs they recount. A yellow feverish flush, a man with a dry cough, a rash that blossoms overnight. They read bodies the way some red letters by. Taste by sight by the way a client strips off his coat and downplays his aches. Outside, a boy hawks oranges. His cry is bright and thin, a laugh in the gutter. He slips between legs, cheap fruit balanced on a tray. For a moment a coin glints on the floor, a copper piece a passing journeyman drops. Before anyone can reach it, a quick hand snatches it. The boy yelps. A woman lunges, but the thief is gone, scrambling over a pile of sacks into the lane. A short chase follows. A shout, a pair of footsteps, the thunk of a palm on a shoulder. The coin is returned, but the ledger gets heavier. Thieves are a hazard. Men desperate with hunger are the sort who might also be carriers of something worse. You note the name of the street where the boy fled. Fewer of the girls will take clients who loiter there. What's this about the captain? Lilla asks, lowering her voice until it's all but a breath. Her eyes are bright with both fear and profit. The fellow in the blue coat, he's been ashore twice this week. Blue coats mean sailors from the King's Grooves, men with a taste for drink and a hunger to match. Sailors bring coin and company, but also port's diseases. 2 different ports, one with a beard full of salt and sores along his arms. Hands like cleavers, someone adds, and the room shrinks a little at the image. You remember last summer when a man with salt-streaked hair staggered in and laughed at the very suggestion of pain until he collapsed with a hideous cough that painted the pillow. You remember the fever that took Lisa's boy for 3 nights after. Remembering is part of the job. You contribute the queer detail you noticed. The captain covered one hand with a leather glove, kept it near his chest, never let you see the palm. Hold him, you say simply. If he comes, make him leave the glove by the door. Wash it in ale if you must. There's practical talk too. Names are whispered along with signs. A man who favors a certain cough, the way a gentleman limps, or the habit of a soldier to ask for candles. People trade tricks, how to say no with a smile, how to keep a man's hands on his own clothing, when to demand coin up front. Their murmurs passed around like a salve. In the middle of this, a girl on the far side of the room smacks a pan and mutters about the constable's nephew. He was here the night before, all sniffles and pompous airs. He kept pinching at his face like he were fanning a fly, she says. 2 girls whispered and passed each other a scrap of linen to tie over the door. Laughter crackles like the fire, sour and quick. The scrap trick is clever. If a girl ties a bit of cloth to the latch, it signals to others outside that the man inside is trouble. Small codes, old and useful. A muffled argument leaks through the thin wall. Somewhere adjacent, a man insists on staying when his coin is spent. A chair scuffs. You hear the clink of glass, the hasty zipper of a purse, the slam of a door as the dispute is settled with a bribe and a shove. The noise tells you things. Men who fight here are often the kind to bring bed bugs like toads to the mattress. The kind of brawlers who kiss with cracked lips and don't bother to wipe themselves. These are the regulars you cross off the list before they speak. Another incident. A peddler selling salves knocks and tries his luck. He offers a tin of mercurial paste and a smile that smells of vinegar. Some of the older women greedily take a pinch, hopeful and cunning. Mercury is a dangerous medicine, but even danger is currency when you can trade away the stinging for some sliver of cure. They tell stories of its success between sips of weak ale. You listen, skeptical but attentive. If it keeps a man from infecting the bed, it's worth the lie. The real currency, though, is caution. The group shares a ritual of ranking men quietly. Safe, risky, poison. Those flagged as poison carry names whispered behind hands, or a small notch carved into the wood of a shared stick kept beneath the table. You wipe the notch with your sleeve and trace it with your finger. That notch is the history of a dozen ruined evenings. You leave with a list stitched into the lining of your memory. A sailor with a gloved hand, an old Tom with a putrid lip, the captain in blue, the constable's nephew who sneezed theatrically. Each name is a decision to be made later, on a night when hunger presses like a fist against your belly and coin looks more like salvation than risk. You step back into the lane where the air bites at your face and the sun paints the puddles gold. You tuck the knowledge into your skin like another layer of clothing, heavy, necessary, and not always pleasant. As you move away, a child runs past, scattering papers. For a second the world is ordinary, a boy's laughter, the bell of the market. Then the reality returns, marks to remember, signs to avoid, men to steer clear of. You tilt your head, smelling smoke and the fruit's last sweetness. You are a keeper of secrets now, a ledger keeper of flesh and fate. The gossip you trade here has saved more than vanity. It has saved lives, and you'll keep trading it until there's no one left to trade with. The day thins into a gutter of light, and the street becomes a river of bodies and breath. You pull the shutters tight, not because they'll keep out law or lust, but because the draft bites and the candles turn into sullen, smoking stubs in any breeze. You light a tallow by cupping your hand around the flame, and the smoke stings your eyes in a way that feels domestically apocalyptic. The room smells of boiled leather from the tannery above, stale beer, and your own sweat salted with rosemary you jam into your bodice to mask the worst of it. You sit on the edge of the straw pallet and check pockets the way you check teeth, habit born of necessity. A groat and 3 farthings. The groat will cover rent. The farthings will buy you a bun and half a candle. You tuck the coins into your shift, feeling the weight of decisions they buy. Tonight the house is quiet except for distant singing that might be a sailor or a drunk poet. Quiet is the dangerous kind. the kind that lets the last client linger and loiter outside your door, deciding what kind of danger he wants to be. He comes in with the practiced shuffle of someone used to streets that bite. His boots are too clean for this block. His cuffs still smell faintly of lavender, the pretension of a man trying to hide trade. He is not a soldier. He is not a gentleman. He is the sort of man who learned early that a soft voice buys courage. He glances around the room the way a huntsman checks his hounds, curious for weakness. You show him a smile tired enough to be honest, but practiced enough to be currency. He nods, a man who thinks nods are law. You measure him the way you measure soup, by how much he scares you and how much silver he offers. He asks for wine. He asks for the shutters closed. He asks slowly if you will say nothing in the morning. It's the last thing he asks that tests you. He wants to go beyond touch. He wants you to do something that carries risk beyond bruises, a trick with teeth or a night in a carriage where he can disappear with your purse and your name. He phrases it as a favor. You know the kind of favor. You have been given them before, thinly veiled as opportunity. You have also seen the bargains that became belts around throats. A noise from the street interrupts you, a child's shriek, then the slap of a constable's staff. A scuffle. 2 doors down, someone throws a pot out the window with theatrical disgust. The clatter of pots means the night has not yet become dull enough to swallow all trouble. You keep the candle half hidden, letting the room remain the exact degree of dimness that makes bodies forgiving and eyes less certain. He leans forward, and for the first time you notice the smell under his lavender, a chemical, sharp, the copper tang of illness. You feel it in the back of your throat like a bad promise. He hums, a man testing. Patience as well as limits. No talking, he says, then adds, I have coin for special services. He lays out the pewter coins near your palm like an offering and an insult. There is always more to be had if you hand over your borders. You are an expert at closing doors, not just the shutters that men come into thinking they can open. Your hand is steady, but your body has a memory of violence. You remember a man who didn't ask. You remember a rope and a bruise that bloomed like a shameful flower on your forearm. Memory makes you merciless with your own rules. You tell him the prices, not aloud, not with the sweet voice he expects. You count the coin into your palm and name the border you will not cross. It is the only power you possess, the right to say no and to collect for saying it. He blinks, offended, then amused. It takes 2 seconds for the swing from offense to anger. The first short incident. A shout outside, a cry of thief, knocks at the rhythm of the evening. A young lad bolts past the window like a hare, and a woman in a faded kirtle claps a hand to her mouth. The thief is clumsy, dropping a coin pouch that spills pennies across the street. They scatter and catch light like a rain of silver. People dive and scramble for them. The constable swears and curses. For a second, the world outside is frantic and bright. Inside your room, the man watches the scene with idle curiosity. His appetite for spectacle is thin. His test returns to you. He presses closer, hands that smell of ale and something medicinal. He suggests an alley instead, where things are quick and men's mouths don't move. It's the classic proposition. The outside offers speed and anonymity at the cost of control. You can imagine the alley's slick stones, the feel of a wall against your spine, the possibility of more than insult, a blade. Your fingers tighten on your coin. You remember the second short incident without needing a name. The woman down the hall who left 2 seasons ago after a carriage accident. She took the quick and anonymous route and never returned. Her bed lies empty like a wound that never scabs. You tell him no to the alley, but yes to the candle-lit room in the house, the terms filtered through the language you've learned to speak, firmness wrapped in the softness of souled labor. He laughs, a small curt sound, disappointed that you have limits. He names another limit, no wrangles, and lowers his voice to imply a compliance he feels entitled to. Your mind traces your own contingency plans. The tray of hot broth in the kitchen that can act as distraction, the cat you keep to knock over cups, your neighbor the tavern keeper who owes you a favor. You know there are ways to make a man remember he is mortal. Third incident, A muffled knock becomes a hammering, followed by the muffled voice of the landlady asking if all is well. A hush falls. Men on this block know the rhythm of knocks. Casual, business, urgent. It is a rhythm you use like a metronome to time exits and excuses. The man, suddenly cautious, tightens like a spring. He begins to fumble with his coin, then with his tone, as if he can bargain for chastity while his hands negotiate differently. You take his palm and pull the coins back. You fish out one of the small advantages you keep. A scrap of linen to quiet groans, a place under the bed to hide what must be hidden. He softens, but not enough. He reaches to press your mouth with a kiss that is not a kiss but a claim. You bite his thumb. The sound is animal and immediate, and it recreates the world as you need it to be. Boundaries respected because you have made them stinging. He reels, curses himself, and you folds into a fury that is afraid of being seen. He grabs a coin and literally tosses it on the bed like a challenge. You pick it up and slide it into your shift. You stand. You study him the way you study a knife. A man's temper can pay for a night or cost you your life. You choose the first. You show him the door. He stumbles toward it and you catch his sleeve, not to stop him, but to ensure he leaves what he came to offer. Coin instead of threats. He pauses, and for a heartbeat he looks like a different man, ashamed, sorry, or perhaps merely calculating. You do not pity him. Pity is a luxury. You close the door with the kind of slam that answers any last question. Outside, someone laughs. The city goes on. You sit back on the pallet and breathe until your ribs stop counting the beat of your heart. You thought the evening was quiet. The quiet was merely the dark getting ready to test you again. You let the candle gutter down to smoke and sit with the coin clicking in your fingers. A small weight that buys a night of safety and a morning that will probably not be kind. The risk accepted, the boundary enforced. It's a nightly liturgy here, performed in small, stubborn motions. You scrub your palms in cold water, the filth of the day a map slowly erased. You do not sleep easily. You never have since the lashings of fear taught you how to keep watch even with your eyes closed. But you do sleep better than you would have if you had been taken where the man first wanted to go. That is its own kind of victory. You curl your knees to your chest, on the sagging straw, and count. The itch marks along your forearm like small, bitter prayers. The daylight has thinned into the gray of late afternoon, a color that does nothing for your complexion and everything for hiding scabs. The room smells the way it did when you woke. Stale ale, damp straw, and that iron tang that makes your mouth water for none of the wrong reasons. Your blanket is the same one you went to sleep under, unchanged, 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 and you find comfort in the terrible predictability of it all. Routine is protection in a life designed to surprise you with misfortune. You replay the day in a few blunt, relentless flashes. The cold slap of river water on your face this morning, the sting that woke you properly. The lemon water you forced down to mask a breakfast of something that passed for porridge. The herbs shoved under your armpits like talismans against shame and sweat. You remember the first client, his sour breath like old socks, the clink of his coins as if sounding them gave him courage, and the way you kept your hands steady on a body that smelled of last night's tavern. You remember the laugh of the sailor outside, the way his boot kicked the doorpost as though your room were public property. You remember the bathhouse later, bright and full of city chatter, a hive where clean is negotiated as if hygiene is a commodity instead of a right. You remember the hush when you counted the coins at day's end, and the tiny, private relief that the roof still holds, for tonight at least. All day you moved between myth and reality as if walking a city street by moonlight. One foot in the theater of fancy, the other in the mud. The myth is a dangerous thing, silk and perfumes, candles and laughter under brocade canopies, the kind of work that gets sung about in taverns and embroidered into ballads. It promises choice and glamour, patrons who leave generous purses and discreet doors. It's a story told by those who either never needed to sell themselves or never had to keep a child fed on a winter's ration. The reality, which you know intimately and carry like a bruise, is noise and grime and a barter of bodies for bread. The courtesan of the pamphlets is an exception, not a rule. The day-to-day is lice, public shame, and the slow arithmetic of disease. Syphilis is whisper and shout at once in a market of bodies. It's the invisible tally that takes its cut in private, a slow attrition that shows up as sore jokes and loose teeth. You use the vinegar behind the ears today because someone told you 100 years ago that it wards off infection. Or maybe it was only a superstition passed mouth to ear like a folded coin. The bathhouse is both sanctuary and risk. You scrub away the day and then stand, wet in a place where another person's pox is a rumor in the steam. Choices are not always choices. Sometimes they're the least bad option on a list that's bleeding options. And then there's the theater of survival, the jokes you tell yourself to make the world bearable. You call lice new pets, in a voice that sounds hollow even to your own ears. You laugh at a client's lewdness because laughter feels safer than listening to the despair in his grating voice. You count coins in the dark and imagine them as stones in a wall you're building, forgetting that the wall has no mortar and will topple if you sneeze wrong. Dark humor is a shield. It doesn't fix the room or the rags or the scabbed knuckles, but it keeps you from dissolving in the face of it all. Yet amid the grime there are small, stubborn lights. A neighbor upstairs, the one who boils animal hides, curses at a stubborn pot and mends a patch of leather clumsily. The curt nod he gives when he sees you in the stairwell is a tiny belonging. A child on the street, too bold for their age, hands you an apple pilfered from a stall and grins like it's a treasure. You accept it because hunger is a persuasive currency. You bartered something other than your body once today, even if it was only a grin. These moments do not erase the filth. They reframe it, offering evidence that tenderness can be dug out of rubbish like a speck of metal that still shines. There is also the relentless state of being watched. The hawkers shout, the piss pots are emptied, the city underbelly is a chorus of judgment. You go to work in a profession that wears a sign you didn't choose. People call it sin or scandal, and they point their fingers with the confidence of ignorance. The law sometimes shelters you, sometimes it punishes you. The parish clerks record your name with the same pen they use for tithes. Moralists write treatises on your soul without ever stepping in your shoes. The mythology of choice, for people in your position, often ignores the pins that hold your life together. Debt, hunger, the need to protect someone you love. The stories told at drawing room tables are convenient. They let the wealthy believe that everyone has the same freedom to choose virtue or vice. Tonight you find yourself oddly grateful for the small things that keep you anchored. You're grateful that the city has a river to wash in, even if it's foul. You're grateful for the cheap lemon, because its sting on your tongue is a reminder that flavor can still exist. You're grateful for the one clean spoon you keep folded into a rag, a ridiculous, tender possession, but a possession nonetheless. You're grateful, oddly, for the lesson the streets teach. Not everything can be prettified. Beauty is not always a candlelit room. Sometimes. It's a warm hand squeezed in the dark, an apple stolen from a cart, the quiet barter of information that keeps you alive. Gratefulness in your life is not grand. It's a measured breath and counting that breath as wealth. In the modern world, you would call these survival tactics coping mechanisms. You would have access to clinics, privacy, laws that, when enforced, keep you safer. The gratitude you feel towards a future you cannot see is a strange, almost forbidden luxury. You think about the later centuries, about soap that's affordable in hospitals that aren't temples of shame, and you let yourself imagine a life where disease can be treated without needing to sell a secret. That imagining is dangerous. It might make you soft, but it's also human. As the evening settles, the sounds change. The sailor's boots fade into city dusk. The neighbor's boiling hides become background rhythm. A moth hits the candle and dies in a tiny flutter. You press your palm against the rough wood of the bed frame and feel its grain. It is an honest thing, indifferent and reliable. You think back to every small ritual today, the lemon water, the vinegar, the counting of coins, and you understand them as more than superstition. They are your liturgy. They are the way you make meaning in a life history has made precarious. You close your eyes and let the dark be thick like a blanket. You do not dream of velvet or a patron's soft voice. You dream of an unbroken roof and a moment without the taste of metal in your mouth. You dream of being allowed to be ill without shame, to be paid fairly, to be invisible when you want to be. These are modest dreams, almost indecent in their simplicity, and you cradle them like contraband. Outside, the city continues its rude music. Inside, you breathe slow and count notches on your wrist like cheap currency. You are tired, you are steady. You are more than the names they call you and the coin they give you. The day has been a ledger of survival, scratches balanced with small kindnesses, humiliation offset with private victories. The myth of glamour is a story somebody else tells. Your reality is work, grit, and the tiny, stubborn pleasures that buy another morning. You roll onto your side and listen to the house settle. For now, that is enough.